Governments around the world worked in tandem with media outlets and with social media outlets to not only lie to you, but to actively punish and censor you if you spoke up about those lies. The video I did last week was about evidence was breaking from Der Spiegel, which is a German newspaper or website, I think it's both, media outlet regardless, that said that German intel told Prime Minister Angela Merkel back in 2020 that the most likely origin of COVID was the Wuhan lab. Now, why was that significant? Because as time goes on, we're seeing pretty much that it was universal for all of the West intel to say, yeah, the most likely scenario was that it came from a Wuhan lab. Today, what my short was about was I saw this morning when I woke up that newspapers are breaking in the UK that the former head of MI6 in 2020 told Boris Johnson, then in the parliament there in the UK, that the most likely origin for COVID was the Wuhan lab. We also had evidence that Dr. Fauci was receiving intel that said that the most likely place that it was coming from was the Wuhan lab. That's what they were saying in private. We know that we had intel agencies such as the FBI that said with a moderate likelihood that it came from the lab in Wuhan. And now, today, we had the New York Times break a big story, and it's very similar. It's similar to Jake Tapper's book on, oh my goodness, can you believe we were lied to about Joe Biden's cognitive health? And it's like, right, by you, Jake Tapper, and your network, and your cohorts, and the people you propagandize for in the Democratic Party. That's exactly what's going on with COVID. So the New York Times coming out and it's like, oh my gosh, shucks. Can you believe members of the media and members of the administration and the intel community and politicians and the scientists lied to us, saying it was debunked that this could have came from a lab in Wuhan? Can you believe that? And then they censored? Oh man, right, New York Times, and you were the tip of the spear. One of the New York Times, I think I reposted this out on X, one of the head science writers in the New York Times tweeted out in 2020, someday we'll get beyond this racist trope that it came from a lab in Wuhan. That's what New York Times writers were writing in 2020. That was what was happening. That's what they were saying in real time. Now they're trying to rewrite history. Just like you see Randy Weirgarten, the head of the largest teachers union, saying, we were never for school shutdowns, when they were one of the biggest advocates of it. How many times have you seen me debate people or you yourselves argue with people online when you heard people say, lockdowns? What lockdowns? I don't remember lockdowns. There were no lockdowns. No one suggested that. Everyone said that if there were lockdowns, it would harm the economy. We lived through it. We saw what they were doing. And now they pretend, well, no one said that. What are you talking about? No. No one said, I had a big argument with, no one censored anyone from saying that it came from a lab. That never happened. And I brought up Facebook's actual policy, saying, yes, we'll censor it. Well, it's not a big deal. It's not happening, but it was good that it was happening. And okay, you were right, but it was a long time ago and it doesn't matter. Let's focus on something now. Like our friend HN that's in the chat here. Why are you talking about it? It was years ago. That's the mentality that these people have. So I thought it was worth going back, and I think COVID's something that we should look back, I don't know, maybe every day, but let's try at least once a month that we should look back on it, at least on my channel, to remind people of the most grotesque authoritarian abuses I have seen in this country, laying the groundwork for grotesque authoritarian abuses that we will see in perpetuity unless we have success at weeding that out, like at least the Trump administration's paying lip service to. All of the horrors that you saw, that you lived through, your life being upended, your children's life being upended, your parents' life being upended, your life being upended, you being called non-essential while they supported people that were breaking the very policies they enforced on you, that were going out and doing things like rioting for Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And what's the excuse now that we have from people? It's time to move on. Let's have COVID amnesty. We all tried our best. We tried our best. New York Times says, oh, shucks. If only there was a media outlet back in 2020 that could have done, I don't know, some investigative work on the origins of COVID instead of just hook, line, and sinker taking what the government was telling them. Isn't that the role of media? When they pat themselves on the back and say, we're the fourth estate, democracy dies in darkness, we hold truth to power. Isn't the implication there that they challenged the powerful so that the average person could get truth? And yet that's never what the mainstream media does. They're always parroting what the powerful say to be propagandists for them. Oh boy, when you have someone that comes in that upsets the apple cart, though, like Trump, that's against all of the, as Mike Pence calls it, the blob or the establishment or the deep state or whatever term you want to use for the unending bureaucracy that really runs our government. Now they'll go after Trump, but they're always protecting that bureaucracy. Do you notice that? And then they act like once the cat's out of the bag, whether it be with COVID, whether it be with the Iraq war, whether it be with Joe Biden's cognitive health, they always afterwards are like, oh, we were duped too. Oh, shucks. We're right there with you, America. Oh, shucks. But believe us in our next lie. Believe us when we parrot government talking points this time and say that you're un-American or you're a Russian stooge or spreading Putin's talking points or you want grandma to die or whatever it is, you're anti-American. You have to believe us next time because, yes, you're right. We've propagandized you and been wrong over and over again. But now we've acknowledged, yeah, we too were lied to, so you have to believe us going forward. But all of these people, how many times have you seen me debate these people? There was a guy, if there's any children watching, I'm going to give you a 1-minute warning and then get them out of the room because I'm going to say something sort of graphic. All right, we assume the children have left the room. There was a left-wing streamer that I debated quite frequently back in the day around 2020. His name was Sonsol. I don't know if he still streams. I still see sometimes he posts on X. Sonsol told me that not only was the lab leak story not true, it was debunked. Now, what does debunked mean? Debunked means definitively proven to not be true. Not, there's a better than not chance that's not true. Debunked means there was a claim and we have completely eviscerated that claim. We have shown that it's not true. The Russia collusion hoax was debunked. That's an example of debunking. But something like, did Assad gas his own people? No, that hasn't been debunked. There's credible claims that's not the case, but it's not debunked. Debunked's more definitive. So Sonsol told me it was debunked. This is years ago. He told me that. Years ago, it was debunked. We went through the science, why I said, I'm not 100% saying it came from a lab, but both from a coincidental sort of circumstantial evidence, it's overwhelming that it came from the lab in Wuhan. Sort of the first cases were coming right around that area, including allegedly one of the first cases, someone who worked in that lab. The coincidence of this unique virus coming out right near an area that's working on these unique viruses seemed to be a bit too much to swallow. But also the science behind it, furin cleavage sites, all that. We used to debate this stuff all the time back in the day. He said, nope, it's not true. It's all debunked. And what he told me was, and I believe I have this. Now, I'm not a sex toy aficionado by any means, so I'm not going to know the specific brands or anything. But I remember, just because of the unique name of it, Sonsol told me if it turned out it was incorrect, that it was debunked. Not that it ended up being from a lab, but if it wasn't debunked, in other words, if we would later find out, oh, it hasn't been debunked, that he would go live on stream and take a, quote, dragon dildo and shove it up his ass live on stream. That's how confident he was that it was debunked that this came from a lab. Now, it is what most governments and their intels are saying is the most likely scenario. So it has definitively not been debunked. He was saying it was debunked in 2021. So I await for Sonsol to come through with his promise. Now, clearly, I don't care. I don't want him to do that. Instead, he should give his life over to God, get into a monogamous heterosexual relationship, have children, and stop being a goofy lefty. That would be my preference. Put away the sex toys. HN says, so in other words, you can't prove Sonsol was wrong for sure. Yes, I can. He said it was debunked. That means proven. At the time he makes the statement, at that point, it was proven 100% that it didn't come from a lab. Was it proven in 2021 100% that it didn't come from a lab? Well, if it was, how do you explain the fact that today most Western intel says it most likely came from a lab? So yes, I can 100% prove that his claim was inaccurate. These are the sorts of games that you see these people pull out. I had someone say today when I brought up, I did my little video on the UK and their intel saying, someone said, Rob's such a hack because he's like, you notice, he's alluding, he's saying that this was a bioweapon that was manufactured and intentionally released. Where did I say that? Where did I ever say that in any of my videos? Where did I say it in my video today? And then I don't even address fucking fools like that anymore on places like X, fuck them. Just trolls looking for engagement farming. I don't give a shit. But someone correctly pointed out, where did Rob say that? Well, he said that, it was all about control, and they hid that it came from his lab. Yes, they hid the origins of COVID because they saw an opportunity. It could very well have been an intentional release. My gut feeling is that's not the case, though. I always thought that what happened was that the United States was funding this lab that was working on making COVID more lethal, doing gain-of-function testing on it, and it had escaped the lab. And once it did, two things occurred simultaneously. One, they couldn't own up to it because all of the world would be super fucking pissed that the reason that their lives had to be put on hold for like 6 months to 2 years was because of them monkeying with shit. They caused the problem. So they had every incentive to say, no, it came from a wet market. But the second thing is, I say this all the time, not everything's a false flag. Not everything is intentionally set up. Sometimes terrorists are terrorists. Sometimes mass shooters are mass shooters. Sometimes hurricanes are just hurricanes. Shit happens. It does. And it's no one's fault. But what the people that run our country and people that run the world are excellent at doing is taking advantage of crises. So they have goals and agenda. And most of the time, that doesn't align with what your goal and agenda is as an average citizen. For example, they want more wealth and power for their donor class. So if something comes up and they say, we could use this for more power. They wanted Donald Trump out of office. This came in. Oh boy, here's a good opportunity. Gave them more power, more control over people. Allowed a transfer of wealth from the poor and working class to the upper class. Allowed them to censor people. Lay the groundwork for internet censorship that would further be used to make sure that it was harder to criticize them. None of that is it necessary for this to have been an intentional bioweapon leak. Again, I know some people suggest this was an intentional bioweapon leak. I don't think that's the case. Hypothetically, it's within the realm of possibility, but it's irrelevant to the arguments I'm making. Similarly, I've never been in the camp that I think the vaccines are intentionally created to kill people. I've never thought that. I thought that the vaccines probably were just incredibly rushed and they didn't give a shit about safety or effectiveness. It was a chance to make huge amounts of money by the pharmaceutical companies. They said, oh, great. I don't think that they sat down and pre-planned a biological attack intentionally being released and then created a vaccine with the intent to kill people. That is not what I believe. Is it within the realm of possibility? Possibly. But that's not my argument. You're welcome to make that argument. It's not what I believe. I believe that they were like, oh shit, here's a chance to make a shitload of money. Let's rush this shit out. I also believe that they intentionally, Pfizer, for example, intentionally didn't say how close they were to releasing a vaccine until after the results of the 2020 election. We know that a lot of their alleged testing had been finished before voting in 2020. But remember, the Democrats were the ones casting shade on the vaccine at first. Remember Joe Biden saying, I wouldn't trust a Trump vaccine, would you? Kamala Harris was saying similar shit. And then immediately, they were like, it's being rushed. It'll never be ready in the time frame that Trump's suggesting. And then almost immediately, after the election, it was like, the Democrats were like, yeah, the vaccine's done. And not only is it a good thing, you should have to take it. We're going to force you to take it. But that's the rewriting of history that people want to do. Now, why does this point about the lab origin of COVID matter so much? One, it matters quite literally on what our response to COVID would have been. Because if this came from a lab, then at the very onset of the virus being released, we would have been starting from a point of knowing more about it than had it just regularly mutated in the wild. It doesn't mean we knew everything about it, but there would be a wealth of knowledge in this lab. What exactly did you do to get to this point? Which would have meant it would have been more effective to come up with initial strategies on how to deal with it. Now, at the end of the day, would those strategies have been much more effective or not? It depends on if the intent was to actually help people and mitigate the damage as much as possible, or if the intent was to lock everyone down and have a large transfer of wealth and power to the powerful. But hypothetically, at a time where we're being told, oh, we just don't know shit, so we're going to lock everyone down and blah, 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 it would have mattered had we been aware of that information. But the bigger reason that this story matters isn't even just that. It's the cover-up. It's the fact that it once more illustrates to you how governments around the world worked in tandem with media outlets and with social media outlets to not only lie to you, but to actively punish and censor you if you spoke up about those lies. It happens to be on this particular issue, which to many people, particularly in the United States, would be the most grotesque example of government authoritarianism and overreach that they have ever seen in their lives. This is probably the most, other than specific individual situations like if you're at Ruby Ridge or some shit like that, the most that most people have seen government intervention affecting them since the Vietnam draft. Look at all the people from Nature magazine, all these virologists that signed a letter, 51 of them or something that signed a letter that said, nope, it's been debunked that it came from a lab. Turns out that was written by this guy, Peter Daszak, who was working for EcoHealth Alliance, who was one of the people getting the grants and getting money to the Wuhan lab from Dr. Fauci. So Fauci's the one setting the policy that in private's hearing, yeah, it looks like it came from a lab, that's publicly telling everyone it's racist to say it came from a lab. Peter Daszak's the one who orchestrates all the scientists to write the letter that says it couldn't have came from a lab. Meanwhile, his job is gain of where he was getting money from Dr. Fauci's organization to send to the lab in Wuhan. And those are the two people we're listening to telling us, oh, you're fucking racist, you should be censored if you're saying this came from a lab.